guys find it, filling that planner out will be huge for you. Getting in a routine of knowing what you have or what you don't have for homework. And nobody hates hates crossing off something when you get done with it, right? I have like 1,000 sticky notes, and I finally got to throw 2 of them away this morning. It was great. Okay? So I want you to get in the habit of filling out your planners. All right. All of you should have your note sheet. Miss Off was actually on top of things today. You should already have a note sheet on your desk. We're starting on the side that has the graphs on it. The graph with the labels on it. Okay. As I said, this entire chapter is online. There is no quiz because there's only 5 sections. Okay, there is no quiz because, well, I guess technically there's 6 sections, but there is not a quiz. What I'm going to warn you, and this is showing up in all of my classes, using websites to give you the answers is only hurting you. I'm going to tell you guys a secret. I've been doing this for 13 years. I know you do it. But you're using a website to get an answer to complete a 5-point assignment, which really in the end, you have no clue what you're doing, and then you take a 100-point test, and guess what? I quickly figure out that you have no clue what you're doing, right? Okay? So just a heads up, it's not worth it. I have deadlines for a reason, okay? I have high expectations, but if you talk to anybody at the high school that had me for Algebra 1 as an 8th grader, you are more than prepared to go to the high school for geometry and further on. I push you, and sometimes it's uncomfortable because you guys haven't been pushed, but that's because I know you're capable of doing it. Okay? All right, here we go. XY axis, this entire thing is called a coordinate plane. The plane contains the X and Y axis is called the coordinate plane. So you have this big coordinate plane. A blank is a set of numbers or coordinates written in the form X comma Y. And ordered pair. An ordered pair is a set of numbers or coordinates written in the form X comma Y. The X value, called the domain, represents the horizontal placement of the point. The Y value, or range, represents the vertical placement. Domain is X, range is Y. A set of ordered pairs is called a relation. So a single ordered pair is just called an ordered pair. When you have a group of ordered pairs, they call it a relation. Domain and range are vocab words today. So domain are always your X values. Range are always your Y value. And people are always like, oh, I'm going to get those mixed up. Alphabetically, X comes before Y, correct? Alphabetically, D comes before R. So the first two and the last two. Does that make sense? Just think about alphabet. Okay? Just think about the alphabet. The diagram at the right is called a mapping. A mapping illustrates how each element of the domain is paired with an element in the range. So ultimately, they have all the X values listed under domain from least to greatest, and they have all the Y values listed in the range from least to greatest. How come the range has fewer numbers listed than the domain? Why does the range have fewer numbers listed than the domain? Brianna? Very good. If you look at the ordered pairs that we talked about here, look at how many times that Y value is repeated. You have 2 4s, a 6, and 2 8s. So what they're telling you is a -2 goes to a 4, but a -1 also goes to 4, hence these 2 points. So not always are you going to have 5 numbers in domain and 5 numbers in range. If a number is repeated, we only list it once. Okay? Determine the domain and range of, now look at this notation here. We have these squiggles on the outside. These are called braces. And braces are a way of saying, like, here's one big relation. And in that relation, there's separate ordered pairs. So it's just a way of grouping them. Okay, all I ask here is you can write D colon and R colon. And Alex is going to make you do this too. It'll already have the little brace listed for you. And now we need to list the domain, which are all the X values. Miss Hoff requires that you list them least to greatest without repeating a number. Least to greatest without repeating a number. So I'll help you out. I highlighted all your X values. What's my smallest? -4. Then 4. And then I close my brace. Range. All my Y values listed least to greatest. Don't repeat. -3. Then. Oh, what? -3, then 2, then. How come there's only 3? Okay, -3 is repeated, and that's okay. We don't want to double list it, though. As long as you remember, domain, all my X's. Range is all my Y's. In a relation or a group of ordered pairs, the value of the variable that determines the output is called the independent variable. A variable with the value that is dependent of the independent is called the dependent variable. Kind of confusing, but you have independent and you have dependent. The dependent variable cannot be determined until you know the independent. The independent can fluctuate all you want. You could pick a random number for it, but we figure out the dependent based off of the independent. The domain contains the values of the independent, aka the X values are independent, and the range contains the values of the dependent, aka the Y. And if you think about that, we plug numbers in for X, right, to calculate Y. Independent are the numbers you plug in. We plug in X values. That's your independent variable. So part of today's is they're going to give us different scenarios, and they're going to say who's the independent, who's the dependent. Okay, you guys are usually the students are pretty good at this because of science class. Okay, think about your graphs you make in science class. Your independent goes on your x-axis, your dependent goes on your y. The dance committee is selling tickets to the fall ball. The more tickets they sell, the greater amount of money they can spend on decorations. Now, the two different things we have happening here are the number of tickets that they sell and the amount of money they can spend on decorations. Those are our two separate variables. The question is, which one's independent, which one's dependent? Before you answer for me, think about it. Dependent leans on the other one. Dependent leans on the other one. Thatcher, what's your thought?
Independent is tickets that I sell, and dependent is the amount of money they can spend on that.
Thoughts? So we don't know how much money they can spend until we know how many tickets they sell? That is 100% correct. Nicely done. The more they sell, the greater amount of money they have. As the amount of rain decreases, so does the water level of the river. So we have amount of rain and the water level of the river. Who can tell me independent versus dependent? Sophia? Wow, if I could spell amount, holy smokes. Amount of rain. So then the dependent would be the water level. Thoughts? Very good. Try A, B, and C on your own. Read carefully. Read carefully. Why do I say read carefully? They ask you for different things, right? It's not always asking you for just the independent or just the dependent. So the cost of a want ad in a newspaper increases with the length of the ad. For example, in one newspaper, a want ad costs $80 plus $2 per word. Which is the dependent variable? Which one can you not figure out till you know the other? The length or the cost? The cost is the dependent. The cost. We cannot figure out the cost. We cannot determine the cost until we know how long it is. So cost is dependent. A function tells us how to compute the output R when the input C is given. Which one is the independent variable? Say it again. C. Independent input. C. And the last one, a company that makes plastic utensils is looking at how the number of knives it sells per week is affected by the price it charges. Which is independent? The price. This sentence right here, the number of knives it sells per week is affected by the price. So the number they sell depends on the price. The number they sell depends on the price. Okay? Good work. Flip it over. The last part of this is just looking at pieces of a graph and noticing the shape. A relation can be graphed without a scale. Notice there are no numbers. But we look at their shape. When is it increasing? When is it decreasing? When is it constant or not changing, horizontal? Okay, so that first one on a bike ride, I don't know how the distance is measured. I don't know how the time is, but I know that somebody went on a bike ride, nice and steady, took off. Then what happened here? What happened right here? They stopped moving because their distance didn't change. Now, could they have been at a park and riding their bike around a park? Sure. But they haven't gone further away from their house or whatever. And then they continued their bike ride. If I was going to write a story of this, I'd probably say like, so-and-so left their house on a bike ride, stopped and took a break, and then continued along the path. Driving to school, specific here. We're driving to school. The distance to school. This doesn't even make sense. Because here I have zero distance, right? Yeah. So maybe we should say the distance driving to, maybe this is from home. You haven't left home yet. Okay? So you took off driving. Then what happened? Stoplight. Then what happened? Okay, you're going slower. How do you know you're going slower in the second part than the first part? It's not as steep. Very good. Then what happens? Another stoplight, and then you continue on your way. You might have gone through Brandon Elementary School Zone right here, right? Okay, you had to go slower, right? Okay, change in income, notice, got a little of a curve to it, correct? Maybe not as steady as driving to school or on your bike ride. Okay, I'm going to read this. You guys on your own pick which graph you think it fits. A, Lisa is delivering a pizza to Mark's house. She drives at a constant speed towards the house until she hits a traffic jam and has to stop for several minutes. After, she starts up again and drives at a faster speed than before. I labeled them from left to right, A, B, C, and D. Which one of those describes Lisa's trip? Maddox. C. Who agrees with C? Thatcher? What are you going to say?
I was gonna say A.
Who agrees with A? Why A? Distance to Mark's house. Distance to Mark's house. She's going towards his house. The distance is going to decrease. This would be like the distance from her house, right? She's driving away from her house or from the pizza shop. So A is correct. B, Jessica is driving at a constant speed. She slows down to pass an accident. After passing it, she goes back to her original speed and continues driving at that speed. She's driving at a constant speed. She slows down to pass an accident. After passing it, she goes back to her original speed and continues driving at that speed. A, B, or C, or D? A, B, C, or D? Sophia? D. Thoughts? Who agrees with her? Hopefully all of you. Constant speed. Your label is speed. If she's driving at a constant speed, that means she's not going faster or slower. She's staying at 25 miles an hour. She slows down to pass the accident, returns to her speed before, and then continues on. In A, what is she doing to start? She's speeding up, then she stays, then what happens? She goes all the way down to 0, right? She stops. B, what's happening? Her speed is decreasing. She doesn't stop here. She stays at the same and then slows down again. C, she's speeding up, staying at the same at a constant, and then speeds up again. Okay? She takes off from a stoplight, reaches the speed limit increases, and she speeds up faster. So you got to pay attention to what your label is. Now, sit still and listen to all of my directions because I don't want to answer the same question 50 times. On a problem like this on your homework, are you going to have anything to write down?
No.
Is Ms. Hoff okay with that?
Yeah.
Yes. On a problem like these right here, independent and dependent, are you going to have anything to write down? No. Now, on the ones that you have to list the domain and range, could you list the domain and range for me? Yes. Have we really done any operators today? Adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing? No. So are you going to have a ton of work? Is that okay? Go to work.